Hey guys, welcome back. This is Angie. So, when talking to a lot of immigrants in Canada, the number one reason that they quoted for not being able to find a job or a dream job is because the lack of Canadian experience. I mean, this is a little bit like catch-22. How could you possibly have Canadian experience if you're never given the chance to work in Canada to begin with? Well, this is a challenge that Rafel's parents faced when they moved from Malta to Canada back in the 1990s, and it is still a challenge to many immigrants today. However, when you go through pages and pages of JD, you do not see company anywhere quoting that having Canadian experience is a must. So, what is going on here? It is like the biggest myth of the century. So in today's video, we want to talk about specifically what does Canadian experience mean, why is it a requirement, and what as immigrants can we do about it. Hold on, before you start, why are you singling out Canada? How come I've never heard of anyone talking about US experience? Well, so I think this is definitely more prominent to Canada or other similar countries that have a very open immigration policy where people could literally apply to be a permanent resident without even having any previous tie or even been to the country at all. Well, unlike the US, where the very few ways that you can actually end up working in the US is either you go to a school there or you have worked there through a company internal transfer, which almost guarantees people to have somewhat of a US experience. So, first and foremost, what exactly is Canadian experience and why is that even a requirement? Well, Canadian experience in its literal meaning just means having experience working in Canada. I have to admit that there are some jobs that would require local experience of having worked in Canada before. For example, with Rafel's job in Canada, at the time when he was applying, Builder was trying to look for someone who are very familiar with the Toronto legal as well as the renovation market. So for his role, not only did he have to have Canadian experience, he also had to have Toronto experience. However, it is also way more than that. I've had over a dozen of conversations with people who are hiring managers, new immigrants, newcomers, as well as recruiters. It is due to the fact that employers are actually not able to accurately assess, oversee candidates' credentials as well as employment history. These type of requirements are also specifically reflected in the lack of confidence, for example, in the employment history or education history, and or the cultural differences in, for example, resumes or languages, or just the ways that we communicate with each other. Well, you might say, that sounds awful lot like discrimination. Well, in majority of the cases, it is actually not that employers have an intentional bias against new immigrants or newcomers. It is just simply the fact that our brain are wired to be lazy. We are learned over time to gravitate towards things that we are familiar with, experiences that we can recognize in a split second. Think about it. Let's say if you're a hiring manager and you're based off of your home country, let's say it's India, or in my case it's China, and you have a candidate submit a resume who is from Canada, a country that you have never been to or you're not so familiar with. How would you make a determination in about 5 to 10 seconds? University of Waterloo. I've never heard of them. Doesn't ring a bell. Well, this person probably also doesn't really speak Chinese well. They probably have communication issues. Pass. But you have come all this way to Canada and you found yourself in this pretty shitty predicament. So how can you get out? Well, believe it or not, there are actually a number of things that you can do that will drastically increase your chance and get around the Canadian experience predicament. First of all, consider switching to roles that are more technical and in high demands, such as software engineers. As I mentioned in one of my previous videos, many tech companies are looking into setting up tech hubs in Toronto. And literally, if you're a software engineer, people will throw money at you. if you think that a career in software engineer could be for you, there are actually a lot of short-term programs that can help you achieve that in just a few months. Second, screen for employers. Typically, the general impression is that startups are actually more forgiving of the typical Canadian experience, partially because either they're not as well known and they're more talent hungry, or because that they're looking for the overall skills as well as qualifications, and less looking for prior experience of have worked in Canada. Number 3, translate your experience into a language that can be easily understood by hiring managers as well as employers. Help them make their job easier. So if you have not worked in a multinational company, that is okay. Put a bullet point explaining what the company do, what does it mean to work in the company, and most importantly, for your experience, instead of focusing on the administrative processes that need a lot of context and understanding, focus more on the results and impacts. Put in tons and tons of numbers, something that can be easily understood for no-brainer. Number 4, beautify your resume. Make sure that it's up to North America standard. Typically 1 page long. Make sure that there's no grammar mistakes. Make sure that you really highlight on the result and impact. And most importantly, also try to customize as much as possible based on the industries that you're applying for or the roles that you're applying for. Yes, I know a standard resume with the LinkedIn Easy Apply option is very easy and low effort. However, dream jobs don't come that easy, right? 5, education credentials. If you can afford it, consider yourself in one of the local programs such as undergrad or MBA or graduate school, or just even participate in a short program such as BrainStation or Skillful. It will also make your education credential more recognizable on your resume. 6, build yourself a local network. Have that someone who can refer you to new job opportunities, who can give you a recommendation when they ask for referrals. It is so important to have a strong and supportive community. So check out my last video where I talked about the typical websites or platforms that you can use to reach out and start building your network today. 7, practice a lot of this with career services. There are actually a number of nonprofit organizations that specifically help newcomers to get a job in Canada. So definitely reach out to these organizations and become a part of member to receive some of the support today. Last but not least, adjust your expectation. Yes, it might be true that you have years of experience. It might also be true that back home you have a comfortable life, a very recognizable job from a big local company. However, things unfortunately are not going to be smooth right away, and it will take some time. So just be prepared and be ready to know that as long as you have the qualified skill, it'll only be a matter of time until you can find your dream job. In the end, I also want to shout out to all the employers that are looking to hire talents these days. Please be aware of these unconscious bias that could happen during your recruiting process. I must admit, when I was hiring for my own team, I have made a lot of those very similar mistakes. For example, under-evaluate some of the credentials that are not very familiar to me. So by recognizing that unconscious bias and also by involving more immigrants in your recruiting process, you will be able to attract a lot more top-tier talents that are literally fresh to the country but can contribute so much to the company. I mean, we all are willing to work hard, so just give us a chance. Well, this is all for today. I would love to also hear from you what your experience has been when it comes to job search and Canadian experience. Comment below and let me know. Until next time, bye!